As a nation loses its culture and loses its belief and its faith, something else fills that void.
Jesus is for everybody. Jesus is not owned by one political party.
Christian nationalism seems to bring together ideas around the Christian heritage of the nation, some sort of returning to that.
You are not here to love yourself. You're here to do 4 words. Love God, love people.
A strand of men coming to faith, and these guys wrestling with prayer and what it means scientifically.
Do you pray every day?
I pray every day, yeah.
Me too. I'm a scientist, but I'm a believer. And it doesn't make nature and science any less interesting. It makes it more interesting.
We don't see the same levels of faith and declarations about Jesus in women's football. So yeah, this really is a story about men.
Faith is believing in Jesus Christ. What did Jesus Christ tell me to do? Gotta follow that.
My faith in God, just trusting in His plan. No matter how things are going, it's all going to work out in the end.
For years, churches spoke about the dwindling numbers of men, but that is not the story now. Stats show a rise in male attendance at church, and there have been many famous men open about exploring Christianity. The boys are back in town, you might say. And in this episode, we are going to explore some of the key factors in that change, the role of football around that, Christian nationalism, yes, we're going there, and the world of wellness and supplements. Do you take any supplements, Katherine?
No, not really. I used to take creatine, but I stopped about a year ago. Do you take any supplements?
I do take creatine. So I got given them for my birthday by somebody. And so I'm taking creatine gummies, and I have no idea what the other tablet thing I take is. But my wife is a pharmacist, so I take some sort of supplements. Yes, vitamin B, vitamin D, cod liver oil, I suspect, in there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I take a couple of tablets.
Is being given creatine for your birthday like somebody giving you like soap for your birthday? Is it like, hint, hint, creatine's good for like brain functioning?
Well, that's the story. Yeah, I think it's just when you're old and people don't know what to get you. Other old people, everybody, a lot of guys are on supplements, as we're about to talk about. A lot of people are. A lot of people have fitness trackers. Got my fitness tracker. We should get this show sponsored so we can get our free fitness tracker.
Oh yeah, should we?
The bands we would like to have.
That's true.
I have the most basic for my step count. You track quite a few things.
Yeah, I've got a Garmin. I track HRV status. I track VO2 max, my heart rate, resting heart rate, sleep score, training readiness.
Right, well, you can come and join the boys being back in town. You also, this is about the boys and the girls, because it's not as simple as a gendered thing, but we are talking about partly the rise within the male domain, but not simply male, maybe making Christianity masculine again. I think that was one of your proposed titles for this episode. So we're going to look at football and faith first of all.
Yeah, well, I think whether you are into football or not, and I am not really into football. I mean, I jump on board for the World Cup, and you know, at this moment you should say it is coming home, right? But I don't know anything about football. I've literally got no clue. But I am very interested in football at the moment because of the rise of Christian footballers who are sharing their faith. And I think whether you care about football or not, it's a really exciting time to watch football because we're just seeing these players in the World Cup sharing their faith, talking about Jesus. And it's just, super exciting.
It really is fascinating because we've seen a little bit of it in the past, but it definitely seems to be on the rise. We've got people doing a very deliberate celebration of kind of taking off a crown and laying it down on the pitch. You've got people pulling up T-shirts or pointing to either tattoos or wristbands or something with a message on it. A little controversial, the messaging piece around that, but fundamentally, they're signposting God in their celebration.
Yeah, and we saw, it's just like the other week, I think it was the French team and the Curacao.
Oh, Curacao. I think
Is
it was
that
the
how you
Germans
say
and
it?
the Curacao.
Is it Germans and Curacao? So after the match, they then got in a huddle and prayed together. And in a post-match interview, one of the players was like, well, yeah, we're opponents in the match, but we're brothers in Christ. You know, we believe in the same God. And so we want to pray for each other and bless each other. And I was like, what an amazing display of the gospel. Like, I'm all in for football if it's like that.
And there were 8, 9 of them in the huddle, a couple of German players, quite a few Curacao players. I mean, it's a big moment for them. They're a tiny island in the World Cup. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago. My kids love their sport, and Christians in Sport were doing a little bit of a presentation, and they'd just done a little bit of research about the number of players, because they were actually, it's their 50th season, as they call it, their 50th year. And they were talking about a time when there were literally a handful of players in the kind of known footballers who were Christians. In fact, they were talking about a guy called Gavin Peacock, and one of my friends was there who played for Chelsea at that time. It was like a 16-year-old. He'd come through, and he was saying Gavin Peacock was kind of it. That was the one Christian player. Whereas they've got research out saying like 75% of clubs in the UK, so right across the English divisions, the Premiership, the Championship, Leagues 1 and 2, and then North, South, whatever they're called, those top sort of divisions, 75% had Christian players in the first team squad. And 40% had a regular gathering for Christians of some sort. Reading the Bible, having a prayer meeting. And this, most of the clubs had responded. They'd written to them all. I think 80-something% had responded. So really good kind of survey set, just to say, actually, it's way more prevalent than you might imagine.
Wow. I mean, the impact that this is going to have, particularly on young men, is massive, because young men look up to footballers so much. So if you're a young Christian and you're watching a footballer, like, as their goal celebration, take off their crown and lay it like at the foot of the cross, basically, and then explain that in a post-match interview, or watch them praying with other players, like, that's going to be huge for just young Christians, and then for non-Christians watching it and going, maybe I could believe if this person I look up to does believe. It's exciting times.
Yeah, and I think there was an interesting question somebody said, was it actually partly Muslim players, particularly during Ramadan when they needed a water break, who were more public about their faith, Mo Salah being one of the better known of those, who maybe actually provided a little bit more space or inspiration for some of the Christian players to be more public. Now, not that none had been before, but it almost felt, and there may even have been a reaction to some of the football authorities pushing particular agendas, pride and captains wearing these things, and some people reacting and saying, hold on, there's a variety of different sets of beliefs here. But we've just seen this significant move, Ballers in God, this account that really follows some of the more better known footballers, and a real public affirmation of faith. And also it seems, and again, we don't want to make a judgment, it seems more authentic, more legitimate than maybe has been sometimes in the past. You get the odd person put up and there's risks around that. It seems like quite a group who are really passionate about Jesus.
Yeah, it's interesting because this definitely is the story in men's football, and women's football is completely different. We don't see the same levels of faith and declarations about Jesus in women's football. So yeah, this really is a story about men. And could be one of the reasons why we're seeing more young men come to church.
Yeah, well, I think you've also put the reason for the masculinity title is it's not just men, it's men in sports, and then I think the wellness industry is another part of that we want to look at, the kind of spirituality and supplements, because there is a link here to the kind of fitness industry more generally, and this kind of, what you've called it the self-optimisation world, which I have to confess is a slightly new phrase to me.
Oh, self-optimisation.
Self-optimisation.
Yeah, it's just the idea that you use different practices, tools, maybe supplements to optimize your existence. So it's this idea of, I want to become the best self I can be, and I will put in a routine or different disciplines or whatever it is, a program for myself to optimize my existence. And then obviously, as we spoke about before, we now have all of these trackers, so you can track your existence down to, all of the finer details, which makes optimization more possible. And so, we see lots of figures and podcasters who are exploring this idea of self-optimization, and then that leads them to an exploration into faith as part of that.
Yeah, I think that's where it gets interesting, is that so many of these guys who talk about supplements, talk about their routines, then talk about faith, either on the journey, it's something they've encountered and decided to explore, or maybe because of their faith, that's got them more interested in the kind of disciplines and routine of looking after their body. And certainly even in conversations I have with friends, like supplements and to some extent faith, these are things that are coming into the conversation a little bit more. Joe Rogan is one of the most obvious examples. He's a former UFC fighter, I think, and has the biggest podcast. But Stephen Bartlett, who we've mentioned before, really into their supplements, fitness, health, self-optimization. But they're interested in these patterns of routine. And I think there's maybe, matter of fact, two ways into that. Some of them feel like they're faith-driven, that faith is really important to them, and this goes alongside almost part of their self-discipline and their routines. And others feel like they're driving for optimization, and then they've gone, oh, well, this thing might be interesting to add in the mix of things. And that's not necessarily bad as a way in. It's bad if that remains it, I think, is the difference there as they journey into this kind of space.
Yeah, and I think it can all be a bridge, can't it? It's all a door. And if, God can use anything, and if God wants to use this sort of wellness, self-optimization world to introduce people to himself, then I'm all for it. And I wonder whether it's sort of a reaction to the sort of anything goes story in our culture. Like, you can be anything, you can do anything, live as you please, choose whatever goes for you, no boundaries, all of that. We then see a reaction of a generation that goes, no, I actually want to know how to live well and how to do things well. And I want boundaries, and I don't know where to find those boundaries. So I'm going to put them on myself. They're sort of self-prescribed, like, this is my framework for living, and this is my bedtime and the time that I wake up, and then this is what I have to do, and this is my wind down time, and then this is how I use food, or this is what I drink or don't drink, or whatever it is. And you sort of put in all this structure and boundaries because you don't have an outside framework for how to live and how to find meaning and purpose and what a good life is. And my prayer and hope would be for these guys and girls who are on this journey of self-optimization, that actually they would see, yeah, there's some helpful things to learn about health, but actually God is the one who provides the best framework for what it means to be human. And you don't need to put all of these strict rules on yourself to try and live a fulfilled life. You can really only find that in Jesus.
As you were speaking, two things came to mind. One was around the kind of Jordan Peterson, the rules, as you were saying, the discipline. You go to bed at the same time, you get up, you eat healthy. Now, one of the critiques is that felt to me a little bit like our conversation of manifesting. It's a little bit like self-help. It's self-optimization. Again, it's that sense that I can do this. If I put these things in place, I can get there. And he interacts that with faith. But I think you got to get to faith. Otherwise, it is all about you. The critique sometimes I've heard of Peterson is it's you pull yourself up by the bootstraps and you'll save yourself to a degree. And then you add Jesus on. So I think there's something to that. It's a wee bit like the manifesting that can lead you into something better. But if you get stuck there, manifesting is all about you doing it. And the other thing was just thinking about Wes Huff again, who we've talked about, is his interaction with Rogan, I think, took off to some degree, and their relationship, you could tell they both are into fitness. So Wes Huff loves his fitness.
Yeah, people call him Wes Buff.
Wes Buff. Because he had an accident or an illness when he was a child that meant he couldn't do sport for a long time, but it's a key part to him of fitness. And you can see there's a resonance, and similarly with Bartlett, they enjoy those spaces too. And that might just be, that's a relational piece of his evangelistic engagement. But it felt like there's something in that space too where, now it's obviously different with someone like John Lennox, no disrespect to John, but with Wes, there's a bonding, and the space seemed to open up for him, particularly with Joe Rogan, because of some of the overlap around fitness and sport, which was just interesting from an evangelistic perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think it's all bad. Like, even some of the waking up and bedtime and routine, like I find all of that stuff really helpful in my own life and enjoy tracking that stuff and being fairly self-disciplined in that. But I think as a Christian, you have to have a degree of flexibility because we aren't self-focused. We have to be other-focused. And so there will be interruptions to our maybe our preferences and our ways of doing things. If we want to love people and serve people, we have to be willing to go beyond our sort of ideal of like, it has to be like this, my life has to look like this. Well, it's not really possible if you're wanting to live in community. So I think we need to have more of flexibility than these podcasters would speak about.
Yes, but there is a subtlety, I think, in the way they're doing things. It's, as in, it sounds good, but if you look behind, I think we have to be careful of that individualistic consumerism kind of undertone that's sometimes there, that I can pick a bit of this, I can add a little bit of prayer to a little bit of supplements, a little bit of this over here. I mean, you've highlighted Brian Johnson is trying praying. Brian Johnson, for those who don't remember or don't know, he's
the guy who's trying to live forever. So his claim is that he's going to do all of these different practices and things which will help extend his life, and he measures that through different things, including grip strength. Apparently that's one of the things that's one of the determiners of what your life expectancy is. Anyway, he measures that. He recently went on a long haul flight and says that his grip strength massively decreased, which shows he lost this many years because of this long haul flight or whatever. So he really tracks everything. But one of the things that he's trying more recently as a way to improve his emotional well-being and physical life expectancy is prayer, which is interesting. But it, like you said, it does seem like a bolt-on rather than a genuine exploration into, could Christianity be true? It's like, this practice might help my life. Let me give it a go.
And we love this curiosity. We think it's fantastic. We just want to raise that little bit of an edge as we're digging into some of this and seeing in the social media space, hey, there's some really interesting stuff here. And I really hope he's on a journey. But at the same time, let's be careful not to just kind of pick and choose a bit. There's a really deep consumerism that we miss. You just go to church and people say afterwards, how was church? And you kind of go, oh, I didn't really like that, but I didn't like the songs, or I did like the sermon. It's like, oh, it's a totally consumerist kind of answer that we can fall into really easily. And I suppose it's just, we're flagging just the really interesting but complex space we're trying to navigate here.
Yeah, totally. And one of the other interesting things about a lot of these podcasters is that they seem to lean more right politically. And I think this leads us into our third section around this sort of rise of men in church. And I think we have to have a conversation about Christian nationalism and the conversation around faith and politics that is very live at the moment. And you're a bit of an expert on, Peter. So why don't you just give us a bit of framing on what is Christian nationalism? What is the conversation? Who's Tommy Robinson? What is going on?
So I guess the starter is, you said about young men or men leaning more to the right. So we're sitting looking at little graphs here that show that. And this is true across lots of different countries. So men lean more to the right politically and women lean more to the left, particularly at younger ages. And that gap has widened significantly. So maybe it used to be a few percentage points. It's like 20 percentage points in the UK, for example. And that's pretty significant.
That's significant. That will have huge repercussions on every area of life.
So just forming relationships, you read about it. We've been reading articles about it, like, because you think so radically different. You think, I can't go out with somebody so politically on the opposite end of the spectrum, not just marginally different than me, now radically different. So massive implications on that. Men do lean more to the right. These podcasters and a lot of these guys who are exploring this space lean more to the right, talk about their right of centre politics, sometimes basic right, sometimes further to the right. And then they link that in with Christianity at times. So not all of them. Christian nationalism is the idea that so one, there's no good definition. Everybody argues about it. But it seems to bring together ideas around the Christian heritage of the nation. There's some sort of returning to that, some sort of Christian values. And that to be, in this case, British and to be Christian are somehow overlapping. That not necessarily you have to be Christian to be British, but you have to respect that it's a Christian country. You have to acknowledge something of its Christian past and that these two things overlap. The overlap gets really controversial. Some of that goes towards an ethno-nationalism, whether you have to be white to be British and Christian. Like, there's definitely really controversial ideas in the mix, but not everybody. The problem is, you might say to one person, you're a Christian nationalist, and they'll go, yeah, absolutely. And they love Jesus and they're happy to embrace the term. You might say to somebody else and they reject the term, or they wouldn't recognize it at all. But there is an interplay, I guess, of Christian faith, right-leaning politics, and particularly, though not exclusively, amongst men and younger men. That again takes us into the space that we're exploring here, because it's this part of what's making Christianity masculine again. The boys are back. Some of these ideas get caught up together, and we're trying to pull them apart a little bit and understand them.
And I guess what's interesting for some of these guys, and I'd say my algorithm isn't really the Christian nationalism algorithm. It's much more the girls exploring like spirituality and crystal stuff. But the little bits I've seen about Christian nationalism is there seem to be many guys that are calling for, Britain is Christian and we're a Christian nation. But when asked, do you go to church? They would say, no, I don't go to church. I don't actually believe it. And I saw this one reaction from a pastor who said, if you are calling for Britain to be a Christian nation, don't blame other people. The reason we have lost our Christian values isn't because of others coming in. It is because you stopped going to church. If you want Christian values, go to church this Sunday. And I thought, oh, that's quite a good response. Like, go to church. If you want Christian values, like, that's the place where you're going to find it. Go and find yourself a church.
100%. Like, so I think we're absolutely in agreement there. Where it gets complicated is you get somebody like Tommy Robinson.
Yes.
He's been in prison, and his chaplain in prison seems to have led him to an encounter with Jesus. That's what Tommy Robinson would say and narrate, that he's had that, and something seems to have changed in his life. He organises a large rally. The first time there's, let's say, 150,000. There's lots of contested numbers. But lots of people are there with crosses, with Jesus saves, with Christ is King. There's a lot of that kind of messaging. And this came not long after, I think at that stage it was the death of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
And that another sort of prominent, I think he would self-describe Christian nationalist in the States.
Yeah.
And lots of people, reacted to that, saw that on their feeds, and lots of different people. The night that happened, I was actually in London staying the same place I'll stay tonight in the Highbury Mission Centre. I remember guys WhatsApping me, guys in their 40s and kind of 50s, my events, going, I'm upset, I'm crying, and I don't even know why. I just watched the guys' videos. I don't really understand it. My 16-year-old daughter said everybody in her school was talking about him.
Yeah.
So it was a big deal at the time. But then you got Tommy Robinson coming in these marches. They seem to have dropped in the numbers of attendance. I mean, the carol service at Christmas, much lower, and the more recent march, again, much less in terms of numbers. But you do have people there who are out there witnessing and evangelizing, street preacher kind of people. You have Christians out there opposed to it and trying to meet and talk and dialogue or oppose it and the racism. And you have Christians who are part of it, in it, some in church leader, bishop and priestly gear. And you have a lot of flags moving around and last time a lot more in Israel and Iran and some of the other sort of national identities too. So really complex picture to kind of navigate. Which I think is at least part of the challenge for us.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to have a conversation about this stuff, isn't it? Because it's quite heated, and there's obviously in a march like that, there's going to be all sorts of bad actors as well who say all sorts of terrible, horribly racist things, alongside a load of young men who are genuinely exploring faith and are, maybe because of a march like that, maybe trying church for the first time on a Sunday. So it's like, how do you hold these two things in tension where something can produce something good and something really bad as well? And I think that is just the complexity and chaos of our time.
Yeah, I mean, the Charlie Kirk murder, assassination, then there was a funeral, which I don't mind saying, I didn't watch it all. I couldn't. I knew some people who did. I watched bits of it. I found it a very bizarre event. There were bits of that seemed Christian, if you like, church service like, and there were bits of that were clearly a political rally, and there were things that said you're just like, no, that's untenable. How can this all be held together in this one event? But I met lots of church leaders, and I met some people who would have said they stood and they committed their life to Jesus watching that on YouTube.
Even in the UK, so it's not just Americans, even people in the UK, and we've heard stories from just random churches in sort of the middle of nowhere who said, yeah, we had a young guy rock up because he stood up during the funeral and gave his life to Jesus. And you think, wow.
Yeah, I was in church in the Northeast. 3 people had turned up at that church, 3 separate young men, and half the church were going, this is amazing. And half the church were like, oh my goodness, what do we do about this?
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's just the complexity of our times. And I think we have to be open to listening and hearing people's stories and just stepping into the complexity and committing to speaking Jesus. Because I think for some of these guys, they have grown up in a time when they felt like I can't challenge what people are saying. I have to believe about certain things. And then they hear some voices that they see as like they're really brave, or they're speaking in a way that's getting hate or whatever. And they are looking up to that and going, well, I want to speak like that. I want to be brave and bold like that. And then they become Christians. And then you see all the street preaching stuff that now is coming out. And you're like, wow, how do we disciple this generation and encourage boldness in the gospel, but for the gospel, not for political ideologies or other things?
Yeah, they're really core identity questions. And that's fundamentally what the gospel is about. Where do we want to find our identity? Are we going to find our identity in Christ? Are we going to find it in something like Christian nationalism? I absolutely want to be Christian, following Jesus, so my identity is in Christ. I am passionate about being from a place called Northern Ireland. That allows me to have about 6 different complex identities. I have an identity crisis every day. Am I British? Am I Irish? Am I Northern Irish? I'm okay with people being passionate about their place, but there is a kind of hierarchy in that is absolutely secondary to me, to my Christian faith. And so how do we help people to explore that, but also not to panic? I think it's not maybe as new as we think it is. This has always been a case that church and state, and there's been overlap with kind of political ideas. I think if we met the disciples, we would think, oh my goodness, even after 3 years, some of these guys were pretty kind of nuts. It's a zealot, a tax collector, a very passionate fisherman. Like, these were kind of standard guys, so we might be pretty surprised at what they were doing. And mainly in this, while it's about identity, I think for a lot of people this is about relationship. Like, they want to get into community, they want somebody to speak into their lives. They're not looking for somebody to answer all their questions. Yes, they churn through loads of content. They listen to loads of stuff online. Initially, that might be a bit intimidating. They probably listen to more than the average pastor has about some of these ideas. So don't be afraid to challenge. I think if you're in the right position, you can do that. I have had pretty robust conversations with guys who are in this space, because I know some of the ideas around it, and push back and said, yeah, Jordan Peterson was really interesting there, but that bit, no, he's like, that doesn't make sense. That's not biblical. That's probably heresy. But yes, he had some interesting ideas. But largely, they just want somebody to journey life with them and actually begin to sort of speak into their identity at a much more local, relational level, their actual identity as a person. So I think we've got ourselves into a little bit of a panic. I'm not saying there aren't bigger ideological forces at work that we need to be alert to. But I think in response to a lot of this, I'm more interested or excited about the opportunity than I'm worried about some of the challenges. And I hope I don't say that naively.
That's good.
But I do think the opportunities outweigh the challenges. There are way more people interested in faith and exploring it and asking questions through these guys, be it the footballers. And let's remember, the Christian nationalism is one tiny strand of men coming to faith, be it the supplements, be it the Andrew Huberman and these guys wrestling with prayer and what it means scientifically, be it John Lennox appearing on Stephen Bartlett's show. There's loads of great stuff happening.
Yeah.
Let's not miss that in the mix.
Yeah, totally. And I guess that's really where we want to land. This is a wonderful thing that's happening in our nation, that we're seeing many men come back to church or come to church for the first time, having never been open to the gospel. Now they are, and we're seeing the conversation about Christianity be a normal conversation for many people to have, but for men to have and for podcasters to have. And then, you know, I'm sure there's loads of men in the pub, or maybe they're not going to the pub anymore, in the gym, you know, chatting about, did you see that podcast episode? What did you think about that? Have you ever been to church before? I can imagine those conversations happening, and that's really exciting. And it does feel like a new season and a different time. I remember when I was a student worker, we hosted a prayer meeting, and our main prayer point was, we want to pray for men, because our student work was basically all girls. And maybe that's because I work with drama schools, but we basically didn't have any guys. And now my church looks really different. We've had loads of young guys come to faith in Jesus, and it's been amazing.
I think you're totally right. We prayed for young men and they're coming in, and God has answered that prayer. He's going to answer the next prayer. What do we say to them? And look, we've got loads of resources around that. We've got things like Ethos, so you can go to Being Human Lens, our website, and you can find out about Ethos, how to help people who are spiritually curious in this moment. Do check out our Instagram, where we'll be responding to some of these young men and many others who are coming to faith or expressing interest in faith. What we want to do is help you have that conversation with your friends. So check us out on Instagram, Being Human Lens, or at the website, beinghumanlens.com. And join us on the next episode, when we'll be looking at AI and how we go analog in the AI age. Be blessed.